What would make a 70-year-old man carry a stranger 6 miles through a deadly blizzard? The answer will shatter your heart. His name was Chief Petty Officer Raymond Ray Kowalski, and by the time most men his age were thinking about retirement homes and quiet evenings, Ray was still waking up at 5 in the morning to run 5 miles in the dark. He was 70 years old, but his body had never quite gotten the message. His back was straight, his arms were thick with muscle, and his blue eyes still carried the kind of sharpness that only decades of discipline could build. Ray had spent 30 years as a Navy SEAL. He had seen jungles, deserts, oceans, and mountains. He had carried fallen brothers on his back in places the rest of the world had never heard of. But he had retired now, at least officially. He lived alone in a small house near Caribou Ridge, Montana, close to the mountains he had come to love after years of traveling the world. The winter that year came early and came hard. By late November, the snow was already piling up against the windows of Ray's house, and the weather reports were warning of a major storm moving in from the north. Ray had lived through Montana winters before. He had stocked his woodpile, filled his pantry, and checked his generator. He was not worried for himself. But Ray had a habit that most of his neighbors knew about. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning, he drove 12 miles of winding mountain road to the Caribou Ridge Community Health Clinic to volunteer. He helped carry supplies, moved heavy equipment, and kept the older patients company when the nurses were stretched too thin. It was not glamorous work, but Ray believed that a man without purpose was a man already dying. The clinic was run by a small and determined team. The head nurse was a young woman named Clara Mendez. She was 32 years old, barely 5 feet tall, and had come to Caribou Ridge 2 years earlier because the town had been without a full-time nurse for almost a decade. Clara had grown up in a small village in New Mexico, and she understood what it meant when a community did not have the care it needed. She was stubborn in the best possible way. The patients loved her. Ray respected her immediately, the first time they met, because she reminded him of the best soldiers he had ever served with. She did not complain. She just got the work done. On the morning of December 9th, Ray arrived at the clinic just as the first heavy flakes began to fall. The forecast had changed overnight. What was supposed to be a moderate snowstorm was now a full blizzard, with winds expected to reach 60 miles per hour and total snowfall topping 3 feet. The county had issued warnings, and the mountain roads were already dangerous. The clinic had 6 patients that morning. 2 were elderly men recovering from illness. 1 was a young mother with her sick infant. 1 was a teenage boy with a broken arm, and 2 others were being monitored for blood pressure issues. None of them could be moved safely in a blizzard. Clara had been on the phone all morning trying to reach the county hospital about evacuation, but the roads were closing fast. A helicopter was impossible because the winds were too strong. The real danger was the medicine. Several patients needed medications that had to stay within a safe temperature range. If the clinic lost full power, those medicines would fail. The nearest pharmacy with the backup supply was in the town of Hartfield, 6 miles down the mountain, on a road now buried under 2 feet of snow and still falling. Ray listened to Clara explain the situation with calm, focused attention. He did not interrupt. He listened the way he had been trained to listen, taking in every detail and measuring every risk. When she finished, there was a quiet moment between them, filled only by the howl of the wind outside and the soft cries of the infant in the back room. Then Ray spoke. He told Clara he would go get the medicine. Clara looked at him carefully. She knew Ray was 70 years old. She knew the storm was only getting worse with every passing hour. She also knew that without that medicine, at least 2 of her patients could face very serious complications within hours. She told Ray it was too dangerous to go alone. Ray said, quietly and calmly, that he had been in worse situations than this one. He was not being arrogant. He was simply stating a fact that they both knew was completely true. He dressed in his cold weather gear, checked his pack one last time, and stepped out into the howling storm. The temperature was 14 degrees below zero with a wind chill. Visibility was less than 20 feet. The road had completely disappeared beneath the heavy snow. But Ray knew this mountain well. He had hiked it hundreds of times over the years. He moved by memory and pure instinct, one careful step at a time, his boots punching through the hard crust of ice, his body leaning hard into the freezing wind and pushing forward. An hour into the long walk, he found Clara. She had tried to follow him, afraid that he would not make it alone out in the storm, and had slipped badly on a hidden patch of ice near a sharp bend in the mountain trail. Her ankle was badly sprained and possibly fractured. She could not walk at all. She was lying in the snow, shivering hard, her face pale and tight with pain. Ray knelt beside her and checked her ankle quickly with his practiced hands. He looked up at the dark sky, then looked back down the mountain trail toward the clinic. He made his decision without any hesitation. He told Clara he was going to carry her back to safety. She told him to leave her there and keep going for the medicine. Ray told her, very gently but very firmly, that leaving her behind in that cold was simply not something he was willing to do. Then he lifted her carefully onto his back and started walking again. 6 miles. In a blizzard at 70 years old, with a grown woman on his back and medicine in his pack. He did not rush. He moved with care and purpose, the way he had always moved when the stakes were at their absolute highest. He talked to Clara as he walked, keeping her awake and keeping himself mentally focused. He told her about his years in the SEAL teams, about old missions he could finally speak of now that enough time had passed. He told her about his wife, who had passed away 8 years ago, and how he still kept her photograph on his kitchen table every single morning. He told her about his daughter in Oregon, who called him faithfully every Sunday without fail. Clara listened through her pain and the biting cold. She asked him thoughtful questions and kept him talking and moving forward through the storm. It took Ray 3.5 hours to carry Clara all the way back to the clinic. When they finally came through the door together, the staff and patients stared in complete disbelief. Ray set Clara down gently onto a chair, removed his pack, and handed the medicine to the nearest nurse without saying a single word. Then he sat down on a bench near the door, closed his eyes, and let himself breathe. His legs were shaking, but he was smiling. All 6 patients received what they needed that night. The storm raged on for 80 more hours, but every single person made it safely through. When the newspaper ran the story, Ray refused to be called a hero. He said he was just a man trained never to leave anyone behind, and that training never expired. Ray never thought of himself as extraordinary, but in the darkest storm, with everything on the line, he chose to act. That choice made all the difference. True strength is not about age. It is about what you carry inside.